Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another Monday Mini, where I'm going to talk about how TikTok has attacked me.
Okay.
Again. Why
right.
TikTok? No. So there was a video not too long ago where they were talking about how some, and they were specifically talking about women in relationships, cannot function in relationships or can't do healthy relationships because of hyper independence. And it is exactly what you think it is. It is when an individual is extremely self-reliant and avoids going to other people for support or help. And just for this Monday Mini, just so you know, I am taking a chunk of our information from two articles. One's from sandstonescare.com and the other one is brainsmagazine.com. Brains with a Z.
Oh.
Yeah. Magazine.com, where we talk about what hyper-independence is, and they talk about what that looks like in relationships and what that looks like with trauma. Because you know we love talking about trauma.
Yeah.
That's what we talk about. In that Sandstone article, it says, hyper-independence in a woman is where she cannot or will not accept help, preferring to do it all herself, and typically creates a strong, superhuman persona. I know you know what we're talking about, people. I know you know. Because again, I felt attacked. I know you do too. Hyper-independence is often a childhood trauma response, though societal messaging and conditioning are also worthy culprits. So it may not necessarily be completely trauma. We're talking about neglect. We're talking about abuse, obviously. Extreme neglect is high key in this too. But also just societal messaging and conditioning. So we know as women, we are told that we need to be responsible or caretakers. And we get that at a very young age. So even if you think you had the normalest of the relationships and normalest of childhood experiences, being handed a baby doll or being handed cookware and such could imply that you are supposed to care for other people. So you should care for only yourself, not necessarily need help. You got to teach yourself, right? Right? Of course, it continues, stemming from situations that led her to believe she could only rely on herself to meet her needs or get things done. Somewhere along the way, she found trusting in others too difficult or too painful. Over time, this belief leads to her needing greater control over her outcomes and external circumstances. So I'm going to say type A. People here, when we talk about the need to make everything perfect or look perfect or do it right the first time, no mistakes whatsoever, because if you make a mistake, it shows that you're a lesser person. Again, this is me calling myself out as well, because I'm one of those, like, if I think I'm not going to be good at it, I will never do it. You will not get me to do it. I will sit there and stare at you like I'm sleeping, like a zombie, because I'll be like, nah. If I don't look good, I'm not doing it. I think it's very obvious that sometimes when we're telling our kids to shake it off, like, there's a balance in these things. But if you're overly dependent on your child, and when we talked about with parentified kids, this is going to be what is led, the hyper independence. And again, that's not great. Not great.
Yeah.
So here's some of the common signs of hyper-independence, which include mistrust in others, perfectionism, avoiding dependence on others, little to no close relationships, not wanting to ask for help, anxiety and depression, taking on too many responsibilities, stress and burnout, and difficulties in relationships. How are we doing, Anney?
What are you saying?
I'm saying it for both of us. I'm just saying it for both of us. I've been reading this one, so I'm like, you haven't. So I'm checking in with you.
Thank you. This is my first hearing about this, and I'm a little like, Also, interestingly, we did kind of talk about this. We didn't use this terminology, but in our last Sex and the City with Maya, with Miranda being so determined to not need any help. So I think that's an interesting part of it too, because I discussed in there part of my mistrust in relationships is with guys. is that if I tell you I just want to be friends, you're not taking me seriously. And so if I do trust you to do a thing, then it's going to be like, but I did this thing for you.
Right.
Which I thought was a friend thing. And now I'm finding out you did not think so.
Whoops. Yes. And by the way, so we're going to talk what happens in relationships. But yes, so if we see it as a hyperindependence as a form of a trauma response, here's what they say. Individuals who have experienced trauma may have had people in their life that emotionally or physically abused them, didn't meet their emotional needs, risked their safety, or were unreliable or absent. These things can cause a person to depend on themselves to survive and make them feel that they cannot trust or rely on anyone else. So I've talked about reactive attachment disorder. This could be a key point in people being hyper independent as well. Sometimes it goes the other way. It gets hyper codependent. And we're not talking about that yet. That might be a follow-up Monday Mini. I don't know. Now, I will say that this is not a formal diagnosis. And again, it's considered more of a trauma or a stress response. So just so you know, it can stem from PTSD when a person goes through a traumatic experience and then learns or feels that they cannot trust others. Like we said before, and this is the one that's calling me out, individuals with hyperindependence may have a fear of abandonment, often because someone in the past was absent or abandoned them, or several people's, constantly. Where I was just handed around and shipped to a different country. Anyway, because of this, they might avoid building close relationships with others in order to minimize or prevent the chances of that person abandoning them. It could be the very much, I'm going to leave first so you don't leave me.
Right.
Because hell no. And some of the symptoms that happen with this hyperindependence trauma is feeling shame if they have to ask someone for help. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, raising my hand for class, for anything, my heart would race and I would have to think the sentence out 4 times before I would even think about asking that question. Yeah. Do you have this? Ooh. Also, isolation, depression, feeling unworthy or undeserving of support, anxiety, thoughts of self-harm, and substance abuse. And again, this is, of course, a little more in depth in that you haven't gotten treatment, you haven't gotten any help, any therapy, rather. And I find that interesting because, yes, this is something that a lot of women have, to the point that they would much rather, I think that's this whole level of conversation, they would much rather be alone because they're tired of being disappointed because they have been taught that eventually you will be disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think there is a lot of conditioning around asking for help with women, of it being, it's interesting because there's almost 2 sides of the coin, right? There's the feminist part where we're like, I don't need anybody, which is not healthy, but we've had to learn to do that. But then there's the other side where it's you don't want to be a quote nag, you don't want to bother people. So it's almost like you can't win. Yeah. And I do think a lot of people, a lot of women for that reason, those reasons have taken it on themselves. And I know I've done this to be that I'm not going to bother anybody, but also I don't need anybody. It's a strange straddling of, I can do this on my own. Right. But also, I don't want to ask for help because you might get mad at me. Right. And I think it's interesting because they talk about what this looks like in relationships. So again, this is from the Brains article, and they say in relationships, the impact on intimate relationships is that hyper-independent women don't allow their partner to help because it feels unsafe and equates to them a lack of control. She's so used to being a strong, independent woman, and anything that undermines her belief in herself is often and vehemently rejected. The irony is many hyper-independent women are craving for anyone to come and help, rescue, or support them. Few can openly admit that. So I hate the term rescue. I hate it. I hate it with all my might. And again, this is, as you were talking about in that Sex and the City episode, she's like, no rescue.
She literally says no rescue.
Yes.
In that level. And I am the similar way. I will say, since being in this relationship where I've finally gotten comfortable and I know that they are going to be around and I've been with them for more than 5 years, it took a long time for me to be like, oh, it's kind of, you're going to give me my coffee? Okay. Because I often, like, and I still do, like, it's kind of funny. I'm the one who'll make it every morning. I'm the one that still cooks a lot more dinner. I've taken it on myself more so than that has been an expectation. Again, because this is that need to be independent, but show you that you need me more than I need you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I did that too. I don't feel great. In my case, I don't feel great about it looking back.
I don't either.
Because I was definitely being like, I'd be fine without you. I don't know what you do without me. But
I mean, that's a point of pride for for me as well. That I'm like, I understand. This is a choice. And I'll be good without it. But at the same time, I really do appreciate it. And when I receive it, I'm like, what's this? What is this? Ooh, me like. Like that's, that's kind of that moment. And that article goes on to say the truth. You are not the burden that you think you are. Another truth. You need to let your partner support you. And that's the conversation again, support. Support and compromise. That's that biggest point that I think we sometimes forget. And this is where the anti-feminists jump in and be like, see, look at you don't need a man and you don't need these things. And eventually I'm like, yeah, but we also like them. Like, it's not because we're not saying to be a feminist, you have to not have these things.
Right.
We're saying that it's hard to find people who can be these things.
Yes. Yeah. That whole idea is pretty ridiculous because again, it should be an equal partnership with equal support.
Right.
It's not the rescue, as you were saying, like the guy rescuing you or all of these other sexist societal expectations that are at play whether we want them to be or not, because this is where we were raised.
Right.
So yeah, it's ridiculous to me when people are like, aha, you like having a partner? Wow. You're not a feminist.
You're in a relationship? You want, like, there's this conversation. And I don't know how we've lost it again. I don't know why. Maybe it's because that narrative keeps popping back up of like, if you cook, if you are a stay-at-home mom, if you choose to do these things, you're not a feminist. That's never the conversation. Again, we want to throw it back to the original, like, when we were talking about women wanting to be able to get jobs and these things. There were many women who were already having jobs, and they would love to have the option of being able to be the stay-at-home mom or any of those things. And they're not being able to have the equitability to do so. Like, this is that conversation. Equality and equitability is the forethought, not what you can and cannot do. That's such a trivial ideal. And with that, having a supportive partner that you can lean on is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. Not they take all of this. Like, it's not all this one-sided conversation. Is it hard? Yes. Is it still hard for those who we would loudly say, I am a feminist, but I take care of the household stuff a little too much because I just do? Again, and that level of like, I can do it by myself. I don't need you, but I do need you. But I do, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be the need you. It's the want you in this conversation. Again, and I like that they say the truth. You're not the burden that you think you are. And more often than not, that is the fear that drives us to go overboard. For me specifically. And I've said that to many people. I've had to explain, if you don't invite me to something, I don't show up because I assume you don't want me there. And oftentimes it's more of the, oh, yeah, I just automatically thought you knew you were invited type of conversation. You better explicitly invite me, because if not, I'm going to say they don't want me. Or they don't, and then that jumps into they don't like me. I'm annoying.
Yes.
Da, 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 da.
Well, I'll never
That
speak to them again.
The
Yes.
spiral that happens. And then that same article says, learning to ask for help and allowing your partner to do things for you is vital to unwinding the belief you created all those years ago as you're ultimately learning to trust again. And yeah, that's that big conversation. Trust that this person will be there for you. Trust that you are worthy of support and that it does not take anything away from you. It's that balance. If I let this person do this for me, does it make me look weak?
Yeah.
Or does that allow me to be loved?
Yeah. And I think also, too, going back to a recent happy hour you did, it can manifest in friendships as well. And sometimes in my case, in the like not asking for help, some of my friends are actually kind of hurt by that. Like, so it is a balance. Like if I don't truly want any help, and I'm good, that's one thing. But if I'm not asking for it because I don't want to bother you, and then the friend finds out, and it's like, well, I could have helped you. That would have been fine.
Right.
And then they're feeling kind of like, well, they feel kind of bad because I don't trust them enough to ask. So there's like no real easy answer in that, but just it is a balance of asking yourself, it would be nice to have help. Right. There are people that would be happy to help me.
Yes, Anney. It's true.
Yes, Samantha, also.
Well, thank you for coming down this road with me. And eventually, I think we are going to come back to the hypercodependence, which is the opposite reaction. But again, like I said, I saw this on TikTok and I was like, well, I got called out. I'm going to call everybody else out too.
As you should. That's how it goes.
Take all of y'all with me.
Thanks for doing that. Well, listeners, if you have any thoughts on this, please let us know. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on TikTok and Instagram at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite shows.